Welcome to Cut Through the Noise. This is Dave Toronto. This program is about people, communication, business, sales, and life. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and share with your friends. Okay, we're back. I've got a special guest who was with me back in the summer, Jay Brunetti from Hire Alliance. Welcome back, Jay.
Good to be here.
Good to be here. I woke up this morning. He was in my driveway, and he said, "Hey, I want to do one of these podcasts." So I had to let him in. I was going to call the cops. It was
very cold last night, too.
You should have rung the bell. Anyways, Jay is managing partner at Hire Alliance. They're based up in Bedford, New Hampshire. Jay, tell everybody a little bit about Hire Alliance, and then we're going to roll right into the topic that you thought would be good for today.
Sure. So we are a staffing firm. We focus within the staffing industry. So we've got clients that are staffing firms that hire their internal people from us, recruiters, salespeople, managers, and we also have corporate clients that will hire their internal corporate recruiters.
Okay.
So we're kind of all things staffing.
Awesome. Awesome. So you have shared with me this whole approach that you have to your candidate base, this whole concept that when you're making calls to people that may be looking for work, they fall typically into one of three categories: the happy category, the not happy category, and the not sure category. Tell us about that, and why should we be talking about this today?
Well, I think we, a long time ago, I felt that, the actual recruiting approach was a little broken. There was a lot of people calling people saying, "Hey, you're a good fit for a job I have. Let's talk." It was all, based on the job they had in their back pocket, right? And it occurred to me that it was kind of disingenuous because when people made calls like that, I don't know if you're a fit for my jobs or not. It just seemed to be the easy way to get someone on the phone. And so we've been, for a long time now, we focus on those three buckets: the happy, not sure, mainly because everyone on earth is in one of those buckets. And they bebop around in those buckets quite a bit, right? So our approach when we're reaching out to people is we're just trying to figure out which bucket they're in. If they're happy, great. Let's find out why they're happy. And then let's stay in touch with them. They're going to want to know us because we've got an ear to the ground out there and they've got a resource that they can use down the road or whatever. If they're not happy, that's obvious, right? They're not happy. Let's talk about it. Let's find out why. The why is really important here. And then we can maybe help them. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. It depends on what they want to do. And then the biggest bucket is that not sure bucket. It is kind of crazy how many people we reach out to and how many people really in the world are just not sure. Are they happy or not happy? And it's where we can offer the greatest help, but it's also the biggest challenge because a lot of people just don't know. They don't know why they feel the way they do in the moment. They just know they're not completely happy. They know they're not, unhappy. They don't hate where they are or what they're doing, but there's something that's not right. And they just aren't capable of figuring it out, because it's not enough for them to make any appointments with their therapist, but it's enough that there's probably something boiling there, And so what we want to do is we just want to enter into the conversation. If they fit a job that we have, that's great, but it's not the main reason we're reaching out to these folks, right? It can't be, because if it is, we're going to jam our agenda on them instead of just trying to find out where they are. And it's a hard thing to do because at the end of the day, we're a staffing firm. You got to place people and all that stuff, but we're still trying to figure out which bucket they're in. Yeah,
it's interesting. I've had the opportunity for years. I was in the staffing industry for years, and I've got staffing clients today, and I meet people from the industry all the time. I wish I could tell you that most of them think this way. They don't. I would say that the average person inside the industry is actually calling with a job in mind, right?
Oh, yeah, all of them, yeah, most of them. Really.
Right. And why is that? So go back to, you want to get into this conversation around whether somebody's happy, not sure. How often are the people on the other end of the phone aware of who you are or who your people are? And think about your clients, too. How often are they making calls to strangers versus people that they already know?
Yeah, well, we're in a unique spot, right, because we staff the staffing industry. So we're calling people. It's almost a little bit of a different challenge because the folks that we're calling, they are taught to do the job a certain way, pitch jobs and stuff. So we may actually put a call in and, "Hey, Dave, are you happy, not sure?" And your first reaction may be like, once you know that we're a recruiter, like, "What do you got? What jobs you got? Show me what you got." They want to hear the jobs because that's what they do all day. And it's like, "Hey, man, we've got lots of jobs, but I don't know if you fit any of them, all of them, none of them." We're just trying to figure out right now, like, how's it going? And a lot of them are like dumbfounded by the approach. They're like, "Wait a minute, you're calling to just like see how I'm doing?" They think we've got some sort of like secret, around the corner that we're going to hit them over the head, and they're not looking like, are they going to get caught in some camera like looking for a job? They just don't get it. They're like, "You're literally just calling to see how I'm doing." The ones who recognize that and appreciate it, great relationships. Then it just turns into really a conversation about them And then the challenge then becomes on us to ask the right questions, you know. And honestly, I think a lot of people don't do it this way because it's hard. You know what I mean? Like there is a psychology to it, and you've got to be willing to crawl into people's brains. A lot of people don't want to do that. They just want to go, "Hey, Dave, I got a job as a software engineer. You do that. Are you interested? No, okay, great. Do you know anybody? No, okay, see ya." And then that's easier.
Is
right?
it?
Well, mentally,
it's easier, but what's the downside?
Well, it's easier. It's easier to say those words. It's harder in that you're going to get nowhere with most of your people, right?
Isn't that a lazy approach?
Well, of course, yeah. Well, because it's you just don't have to go deep there, right? And you can still fulfill all the metrics and whatever that is, you know, with all your companies. But you're really not building a relationship there, right? You happen to have a guy, he happens to fit, and we're going to send him over here. So you've got to be ready. Like, it's two sides of the coin. We need people receptive to the conversation. They just need to understand that we're not trying to, like, you know, do some weird trick around the corner. We really want to know, how is it going? How are you doing? Because a lot of people may say to us they're unhappy, and when we're done talking to them, they're really not unhappy in the job, or, you know, they just had a bad day, you know, and you really have a conversation with them, and they're like, they kind of appreciate that you're not trying to rip them out of their seat. You have a convo, and when you're done, you're like, you know, a lot of the things you're saying to me kind of like just sounds like you had a bad week here, you know. And but the stuff, when I ask you what you like, it's a lot. There's a lot there. It just doesn't feel that way right now. And what you've got is a relationship. Am I going to place that guy today? No. Is he going to be with me over my time doing this? Yep. Because he's going to trust that I'm not just trying to make a deal. I think this industry, staffing in general, is so much around like deals. Everyone feels like they're the next deal. And so when we staffing firms, they do it all day. We come around and they think they're our next deal. We got to get them out of that mindset.
It's funny you say that. I actually was talking to somebody the other day, and I made a note here, but they get calls on a regular basis from different recruiting firms, and the first thought they have is you're just trying to populate your CRM.
Right.
And that probably ties back to your metrics comment.
Yeah.
Do you hear that a lot?
Yeah, well, we definitely hear the, you know, because they're in the business, you know, they can play that metrics game with us. Like, okay, well, I'll spend a few minutes with you so you can get your screen conversation. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And then, but ultimately, it's our job to be like, okay, well, let's do this. And then 30 minutes later, they're like, they find some real value in what we're doing because they realize we're not actually duping them. We're actually literally having this conversation. And to do it, though, I mean, the challenge here, it all sounds great, but on the flip side, we've got to be willing to have that conversation. If you've got someone on the phone who sounds like they could be a great candidate for you, you can't just run with the surfacey information. We've got to get layers down to really understand why they say they're unhappy or why they're unsure or willing to look. Because if we don't get there, it's just spinning everyone's wheels. And it's hard to do that for people because I've got a guy here or a woman that's going to interview for me. It's easy to just leave it there and go and then just try to set them up and hope it works out. But that doesn't really solve anyone's challenges. You just basically have someone that even if they take your job, they're probably quitting in 3 months, and we've wasted everyone's time because we really haven't got to the core of what's driving them.
Right. So I've known you for a long time, so it's easy for me to sit here and agree with you. I believe you. I know this is who you are. But that doesn't mean that the people on the other end of the phone or the other end of LinkedIn or an email know who you guys are or one of your people is. And this applies not only to Hire Alliance. I would say this logic applies to any type of company that's in hiring mode. But you said to me earlier, actually before we actually started recording, that these people are getting, in some cases, thousands of calls over the course of a year. It could be, right? So no matter how well-intentioned you are, in your, you know, in this happy, we want to have this good conversation. Do they all want to have it just because you have good intentions, or how do you get into a conversation where they actually recognize that, oh, this is worth having?
Well, I mean, that's the rub, right? I mean, a lot of them don't think it's well intended. They don't think that you're calling for their best interests, right? I mean, we're in a world now where everyone's looking out for themselves, and you can't go a day without something on social media that makes you want to hide in your house, right? So it's the same kind of thing. So I think it's determination, and we've got to stay with the messaging, and we, on our side anyway, we don't waver from this. You know, we need to stay on track, and it sometimes takes a bunch of reach outs. You know, there's people that I've talked to that didn't get it the first 5 or 6 times, and eventually they get it. You know, and you've got to stay consistent with what we're trying to achieve here, because it goes well beyond staffing, I think, right? I mean, everyone in any relationship they're in, they're either happy, not sure. Yep. You know, whether it's a marriage, whether it's their relationship with their kids, whether it's their employee relationship, whatever it is.
Right.
You're always in one of those buckets, and again, it goes all over the place, right? So it's just, are we having these conversations holistically everywhere, or are we just talking about the jobs? Metaphorically, like, are we, the wife and I, are we just talking about the surfacey stuff? Which is the surfacey stuff that the job, when I call someone with just a job, and are we just always living up here on the top layer, or are we really getting to the core of what's driving people? Because again, happy's easy to see, unhappy's easy to see, unsure is really hard.
How often is the happiness and the not happy and people not being happy tied specifically to the job itself versus something else?
I think a lot of times it's something else. I think it's the job is the end result of it. There's something deep down that's driving them. Now, this could be pieces of the job or the way they have to do the job, but it's not ever just the job. It's something else that's underneath there that we really got to get a core, and that's why it's difficult, because we may talk to someone that's specifically in a staffing firm, and they're saying they don't like the manager they're working for, but really it's not the manager they're working for. It's that they don't like to cold call, and the manager's asking them to do it. And guess what? They're going to have to do that everywhere they go. So that's not a person that's going to leave agency A and go to agency B and be better. Right. It's not the manager's fault at this point. That's the business. There's other people that are like, well, the manager yells at me every day. Okay, well, that's a different story, right? But I don't like the manager because this person makes me make cold calls. Well, he's not making you make cold calls. That's just a necessary part of the business that you have to kind of do, right? And it's that they don't like. And then we got to find out why don't they like it, and is that solvable? And if it's not, they then need to do something that doesn't require that.
So let me ask you this. Why do you think that so many companies in general, agencies, not even agencies, any company, why do you think so many of them lead with a job description? I understand it's a necessary part of the process, but it's rarely the part that makes things work or not work. Why is it that tends to get in the way is really what I'm suggesting. Yeah. Why is it that becomes the lead story?
Well, my gut is the person on the other end of the phone doesn't think they can add value without it. Mm-hmm. So they believe their value is the job they have to show you, which I disagree. I think the value I want my people to have and I want to have is to have this conversation. Like, no one's having this conversation about them and what makes them happy and not happy, right? I show you this job, it's $10K more and it sounds great. We still haven't ever talked about, well, you may not even like doing this in general. So that's not going to solve your pain. You're going to take this job and 6 months later call me and say, I'm still not happy. Right, so I think the job, leading with a job, I think, again, a lot of people in this business feel like that's their value. My value and only value is I have a job that you may fit, which to me, that's like terrible. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want my value attached to the jobs I have. I want the value attached to the fact that I'm willing to have a conversation like this with you, and that may lead with never taking a job from me. It may mean that you just call me every once in a while for advice. Fantastic, because you believe I really have your best intentions in mind versus I'm just trying to shove a job down your throat.
Yeah. So would you say that the average person in the business is viewed as a recruiter and not necessarily a career strategist or a career planner?
Absolutely.
Should they be thought of as a recruiter? Is that a fair?
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, there could be some room for that. And again, this is my viewing. Like, I don't want to be viewed as a recruiter. I guess it doesn't mean that these other people, there could be some value there. I just feel like I want there to be more than that. I want them to view me as a resource, career resource, but even bigger than that. I want them to view me as someone that they get any kind of problem whatsoever. I'm going to straight talk with them, tell them what I think, and figure out which one of those buckets they are. And that's why, because we've got people that will reach back out to us and they call us for things that are not staffing related. They're buying a house. It's their first house. They've known us for a long time. Do you have any advice on that? And we really know if we've got a good relationship, if people are calling us for things that are not job related, right? But I don't know. There could be, I'm not saying that this is the only way to do it, and I'm not saying that everyone has to do it this way or they're, never going to be successful. I just feel like for how we do it, I need the value to be around the way we communicate with them and helping them through the psychology of this versus we just happen to have the most jobs, the fastest. You know what I mean?
Is there a stigma, so in your experience, is there a stigma associated with the industry? I know there's a stigma associated with all due respect to all of you out there that are in wealth management or you sell insurance. there are people out there that are phenomenal at it, but there are a lot of you out there. So you walk into a room or you go to a networking event, and there's nobody that doesn't work for a wealth management company. There's nobody that isn't selling insurance. And there's a lot of recruiters out there.
Oh yeah.
You know, and a lot of the people, when you have this many people, there are a lot of them that aren't any good. And I mean for all of these industries. There's a small few that actually learn to be professionals. So how often are you working against the very people in your own industry that are creating this other story? Are they the reason some of these not sure people aren't willing to have a conversation?
Yeah.
They're conditioned not to have the conversation.
Absolutely. No, there's no doubt, right? I mean, just because there are a lot of, recruiting is a massive, $250 billion industry, right? So there's lots of people that do it, which, like you said, that means there's going to be lots of people that don't do it that well. And there's a white noise now, especially with LinkedIn and all these other tools. There's just and unemployment's at 2.8% or whatever it is, right? So we're in this place where the war for talent, and it's like literally they use the word war, like we're going to go out and we're going to, fight and get these people with guns and machetes and whatnot, because like we can't find people.
Oh, it's gotten intense.
And then it just turns in because it's so, it's so hard to find people, but then they're just bombarded and it's white noise and it's all the same stuff. And you get kind of no offense to the used car salesman, but you get the used car salesman feel. Like they're just another recruiter calling me about this thing. And it's like they're on a hamster wheel they can't get off.
Okay, so let's just say for the good recruiters out there or the good career planners out there, I'm somebody who's not sure. But I'm kind of used to being unsure. I'm kind of used to just doing this work because it's all I know. And you're not supposed to be happy at work anyway. It's a job. I'm just trying to make a living. But I don't even realize that maybe taking a call or accepting a call could actually add some value. Like, why should I take a call? Like, what would cause me to want to take a call from a recruiter?
Well, again, I think if you're doing it the way we do it, it's to validate how you're feeling or dissect how you're feeling and get into kind of like what's really going on. And so once we start talking to people about the happy, not sure, we roll right into likes and dislikes. Like, what do you like about what you're doing? You get up, you're excited about going in. What is it that you're thinking about in that moment, right? Then there's the other side. Like, if you don't like, what don't you like about it? Because everyone's got likes and dislikes. Very rarely we talk to someone that's 100% happy and doesn't like any part of the job. The question is, what's the ratio of likes to dislikes, and what are the things they don't like, right? So those they can not like one thing, but that one thing could be really big.
Yep.
Or they could like one thing, but that one thing is really big. So diving into that likes and dislikes gets us down the path of them starting to reflect, because a lot of times they don't think about it that way. And especially when we ask them, like, when you're really, like, when you've had a good day, like when you've just super excited, you're driving home and go, that was a good day. What happened?
Right.
What'd you do that day? And and then when you drive home and you're like, this is miserable, what happened? Now we start to get into some concrete conversations around real things. And that's where our job is really hard. We've got to kind of like keep going layers below. It's not usually the first 2 or 3 things you're saying to me. It's usually the 5th and 6th and 7th. When I've continued to ask you why. Why does that make you feel that way? And why did that affect you that way? Okay, and what about this? And what about that? And by the time I'm done, we're down here in the core of the real issue. And that's going to be the key to the whole thing. That's going to tell us, should you stay? Should you get out of the business? Or should you go somewhere else in the business? That's kind of the only options you've got, right? Stay, keep doing what you're doing. Leave the industry because it's not right. Or you're doing the right thing, but it's in the wrong company.
Could you ever show at some point, if you're not leading with a job, could you ever show somebody a job too quickly? Could you assume that, because I'm not happy or because I'm not sure, now's the time to show them something? Could you do that too quickly?
Yeah, and it does happen. It happens a lot because, some people, we've got to get to those layers I was talking about. Sometimes you're at the top layer and someone says there's a reason why they're looking, and it's maybe similar to someone else's reason from that same place. Yep. And you immediately kind of go, this must mean this. And then you've got a job and you're showing them a job because it sounds like it all makes sense. And then, 3 weeks later, they're pulling out of the process and leaving the world and going into marketing. And you're like, where'd that come? Well, what? How'd that happen? You know what I mean? It's because they were always going to marketing. We didn't ask enough questions on the front end to figure that out.
Sure.
Because it did seem like what they were saying sounded like someone else that we've already talked to in the past, and we just made a leap. That's probably the biggest challenge, honestly, is doing it because it feels right in the time. They're saying all the right things. They're leaving for the right reasons. You've heard this story before. You've actually placed someone with a similar thing. So you're like, this is going to happen the same way. And we make assumptions. When you find yourself making assumptions, it's bad. You kind of almost have to erase every person you talk to has to be a new person, and you have to like get the Men in Black thing and erase your brain from every other conversation you've had, because you will create a story in your head that may not be accurate because you've heard it before.
So you had the whole getting tons of calls. Does that create kind of at least in my experience it used to, where you've got people out there, they almost feel like they're celebrities. Because I'm getting all these calls, and they have this high level of self-importance that's really kind of false.
Yeah.
Right? And do you run into that where they think they act like they're doing you a favor by taking your call?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they act like they're doing a favor, but I will tell you there are people that they're like, we call them the serial interviewers, right? There are people that want to interview because they want to be wanted, but they're never going to take any of these jobs. Yeah. They just like to go out, and feel, and some of it's ego, some of it's they just, want to be able to throw that in their boss's face if they need to. But that's what I was just talking about earlier, where if we don't really get to the right level with that person, we think we've got a candidate, we just get a serial interviewer that just wants to feel good this month. So I'm like, yeah, I'll take your interviews. They'll say all the right things. We don't really get down deep with them because they said the right things up top. And next thing you know, we get someone that's just wasting time because they want to go around. They want everyone in town to hire them. They don't take any of the jobs. They go back to work, and it's like, well, that was a waste of time. And we probably could have avoided that if we had the right conversation with them.
Right. When we talked last time, you talked all about trust and value, which is really the foundation of your company. You've got to have a real unique ability to establish trust with people in order for them, especially if they don't know you, to tell you the truth, tell you why they're not happy, or to come out and say, look, I'm just not sure what the heck to do. I don't even know why I'm doing this. Like, I wouldn't think that the average person who doesn't know you is going to say this. And this is not just about you. This is just about all the recruiters out there. Are they really having honest conversations with people? Are the people just having arm's length conversations? Are they being on the table?
Yeah, well, I think I don't think a lot of them are having honest conversations with themselves. I mean, that's where it starts.
Who's not?
The candidate, whoever you're talking to. They're not really being honest in their own brain, and that's where I think the questions come in. And honestly, where you build the trust is if that candidate I just explained, the serial interviewer, if I keep going down to the layers and I've got a candidate, and he knows because he's in the business, he knows how valuable it is to have a candidate who's willing to interview, because that's what he does all day, right? And if I'm going and I'm like, I haven't gotten to a point where I think it's going to make sense for you to interview. He's like, what? Like, he's never heard that before, right? Because whenever he gets a candidate that wants to interview, he's getting them on the interviews, right? And I'm like, well, what's the reason? And if I'm willing to walk away from that, go, look, it doesn't make sense because I haven't heard the right things, that's where the trust starts to be built there, right? Because it's not, I just can't say, hey, trust me. You have to do it in the actions, and they'll start to really believe at that point. Well, all right, so maybe this guy actually does care. And now I'm having a real conversation with that person, and it goes down a million other paths, of which it could be just stay where you're at. They could have just had a bad day. They are a serial interviewer, and they're going to admit that, well, look, I mean, I do this because I kind of feel like at times I'm not appreciated here, and I like to go have these conversations to feel appreciated. And I'm like, well, does that really make sense? Because you're not going to leave, and you're going to end up burning some bridges around town by doing these things and never taking these jobs. That's a specific example, but that's kind of where that goes. But that's how you build the trust with these guys, is that you need to kind of do what you say you're going to do. And if you've got someone who's willing to go on interviews or willing to do this, and you're like, well, I don't think it makes sense to do that, I haven't heard why it would, they just don't know what to do with that. Right. And that's where the trust starts to really be built.
Interesting. What advice would you give to any company that's in this situation where you got to reach out to a candidate population that may or may not want to take your call? What advice would you give them, things they should do or things they just shouldn't do, if they want to get to this point where the person's open with them?
I mean, I think the advice is I would stick to the this methodology and stick with it, and just its volume. I mean, you need to talk to a lot of people. They're all not going to react the same way. You've got to be convicted, though. But just because I do it this way and Hire Alliance does it this way, it doesn't mean ABC Agency should do it this way, right? So I think, or an internal company that's hiring their folks, they may not believe this. I believe wholeheartedly that this is the way we're going to enter into the relationships with these folks, because I want it to be more than just I have a job. There's some that don't want to do that. Like they only want to be known as the person that has a job. Fine, then don't do this. That's going to be really hard for them to do, and they're not going to have the right people to do it. Right. But if you feel like you want value-driven relationships with candidates, whether it's, again, corporate clients hiring internally or agencies that are going to work with placing people, I would do it this way, because that's where the value comes from in entering the relationship in this, where are you at? Which bucket are you in? And then maybe we'll talk about jobs 30 minutes down the call, if it even makes sense. That's kind of where we are with it. But it's not going to work for everyone. There's plenty of places that just are fine being known as call us when you need a job. I'd rather them call us when they need some help, and whatever it is, or advice.
Right. Right. Okay. Just other things like stay away, beyond the job. The only other comment I would have or questions I would have are like when you're calling people. Some of them are at work and can't talk. Some of them don't even understand what the next steps in their career could be. So how do you? Any thoughts on that? Generally speaking, from an etiquette perspective, like they might be confused, but their boss is sitting right there and the phone rings. And
yeah, it's a big challenge. It's funny you say that. We've just had some conversations internally around this. I mean, it's tough. I mean, it definitely feels like a different world. We're calling someone at their desk and they don't even know what to do with that, right? But we do a lot of that because our thing is we need to communicate with them. We need to separate ourselves from everyone else, and just throwing notes in LinkedIn gets lost. I mean, it's just too much of that, right? And not everyone, has a cell phone posted on LinkedIn, right? So at times, the only way we can communicate with them is because we know the number of the office they're in. And we call them and say, hey, we're not calling to rip you out of your seat. This is what we do. This is why we're talking. Can you talk? If they can't talk, we ask if they can listen. And just say, look, this is what we do. It's a very non-threatening thing. We get it. Most people are sitting with their boss 5 feet away. And we're like, we're not calling to put your job in jeopardy. This is what we do. If you think this is something that makes sense, shoot me a note on LinkedIn, send me a cell, and I'll give you a call. We kind of know going in that it's going to be fairly stressful for them getting these calls. But the value on the other end is greater in connecting with these folks versus just pretending that we're never going to call them in the office. It's just,
okay,
we got to do it.
All right, so one last, any last pieces of advice or thoughts for anyone who's listening today, and I'm sure there are millions out there listening.
Millions.
At least millions. I think the last count was like
tens
5.
of people.
Yeah,
tens
of people or 5 million. I can't remember. But anyway, any last final thought for anybody that's listening that you'd like them to know?
I think the overall concept here, I think for me, this happy, not sure applies in everything. It's not just a hiring tool. It's not just something that we use and it's a one-off with recruiting. Again, it's a relationship piece, and just you got to constantly have the right level conversations with whatever relationship you're in, whether it's with your kids, the spouse, whether it's the employer, the employee. If we're staying up top in that first 2 layers, we're probably not really getting to where we need to be. Employee engagement or happiness in our relationships. We will probably deal with someone that's not sure and we don't know it. We think they're happy, but they're not sure. And then that turns into something that if it's not addressed, it turns to an employee leaving, or an employee not taking a job, or a relationship fracturing. It's dangerous. So I just would say try to get to those right levels when you're having conversations with the people that you care about, because we live up top too long. Too much.
All right. That's good. All right. So we'll wrap up with that. You're going to come back on soon, and we're going to talk about millennials, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, right, that's a fun one. Everyone likes that.
So get your thoughts together. Hope everybody enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks again for listening. For more information on our services, check us out online at jcegrp.com, and feel free to follow me, Dave Toronto, on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter.